I will tell you the biggest misnomer in our business, which is that great marketing sells houses. It's absolutely unequivocally the dumbest thing that I've ever heard.
Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. Today we have on Frank DiMaggio.
So Frank, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ken.
I can't wait to have you today because we've been talking for a long time. We've been friends for a while.
Yep.
And you've done a lot, and I think it's interesting because you've taken a very untraditional path. And I think a lot of people believe that they need to start with school and kind of do all those kinds of things. And I know you kind of started with baseball and all that, and you got here. But why don't you walk us through kind of your path?
Yeah. When you're talking about, right now, most people know me for real estate and obviously owning the restaurant. But, how did you get into real estate? I think a lot of people kind of fall into real estate. The way that I got into real estate was I actually owned a technology company where came out with an idea for a piece of software that would introduce you to your neighbor in an apartment community. I always felt like if you lived in an apartment, you didn't know anyone. This was a way to kind of introduce you to your neighbors. So it was coined as kind of the first micro social network. We weren't interested in being as big as possible. We just wanted to be for that one apartment. And the technology that we tried to even patent was the opposite of what everybody else was doing, which was instead of friending or linking in, you would actually get auto-friended with everybody and delete, your ex-boyfriend or the people you didn't like off of the platform. And when I was building it out, I was fortunate enough to meet an individual who was one of the largest developers in the country, was formerly the CEO of a publicly traded company. And he invested in that, and we built it out for a period of time, and unfortunately it didn't work out. And he was an expert in real estate. He was an expert in the building business and really every aspect of investing and lending in real estate, and kind of came to me when it was done and was like, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I met this girl and we've been kind of flipping real estate on the side because I wasn't taking money out of this technology startup. I had to try to produce revenue somehow. So we were doing these little deals and he was like, well, let me see you, kind of do one and let's see how it goes. So we did one together. I had to borrow from friends and family, everybody that I possibly could to get that one off the ground. And that first one went really well for us. And then that kind of catapulted us into a relationship with him as our lender. And I ended up doing 35 deals with just that one individual.
So when it came to flipping, what was the biggest mistake you made that cost you a lot of money?
Yeah. So a lot of times, especially early in your career, what you'll hear that you need to be laser focused, right? Like you find that one thing, you find something that you're good at, and you just stay absolutely laser focused in that until you get to a point in your career that you can figure out other revenue streams. I did that for the first couple deals. I was like, you know what? I'm going to be a 1990s single level split floor plan Paradise Valley flipper. And that was the only product that I was looking at. And after I did like probably 6 or 7 deals, and they all made a lot of money, I was like, oh, I can walk on water. I can do anything. So I went to a market that was completely out of my purview that I knew absolutely nothing about. I went to a golf community in North Scottsdale. I had never been up there. I didn't even know how to drive there. And I bought this house and, well, we did our typical and we thought, you know what, we'll just do our thing. And it's such in demand in this market that it'll sell. That's not what happened. We ended up holding on to it for way longer than we needed to. And I actually had to pay the individual to move into the house a little over $200,000 just to move in, just to get out of the deal.
Wow.
No, that's a really interesting point. You bring it really good. It's not too subtle either. Like I think a lot of times people, because I've fallen into this, where how you're just like, I can do that, so I can do this. I can do this, I can do this. And you kind of discount the niche and the the experience and the wisdom that you have for that little lane you're on, right? And I think a lot of people do that.
It's commonly talked about, especially early in your career, that if you've got a skill set or if you've got something you're really passionate about, the worst thing that you could do is try to be all things to all people. It's to stay as focused on that one thing as possible. And then when you get extremely successful and you've gotten to the point that you feel like you've really dominated that market, that's when you start to venture out and lose money in a bunch of fun things like all my investor buddies do.
I know I've jumped out of multifamily more than once, and every single time it's just a distraction,
Yeah.
Custom homes, we did lots up in Jackson Hole.
Yeah.
We did an office building, did self-storage, and every single time my learning curve is like straight up.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And it just comes pounding in your face.
So when you look back on your deals, what is separating a profitable flip from a total disaster?
When I'm doing flips, I'm doing luxury, ultra luxury. Okay. So I could tell you that there's a lot of people who flip and they flip $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 houses, and they're probably going to answer this question differently than I would. The consensus is generally you make your money on the buy. That is generally the consensus. What I would tell you is, although that is exceptionally important, probably the number one most important, if you deviate from your budget or you deviate from your time schedule, the interest and the overage will eat you alive. Doesn't matter how well you bought it.
You probably start with margins, right? I would guess, right? And then do you pull a trigger on a certain margin?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that. Early in my career, that was exactly the way that I underwrote my deals. Was I looked at a deal and I said, you know what, if it makes at least this amount of money, if this number is at the end and it's in my box, as I called it, then I would pull the trigger and make an offer. Similar now. Now it's getting to a little bit different. I'm just at a different point in my career than I was in the beginning, and I'm more looking at it like, rather than trying to do 25 or 30 deals, at one point we were doing 22 deals at one shot, to look for the most profitable, to look for the places where I can make the best return on my time and take some of my time back to be able to spend time with my family and all that kind of stuff, and not just work 18-hour days.
So do you think in this market, because in our market specifically in Arizona, the market's a little slower than it previously was when maybe some of these flips started. Do you see people in trouble right now, flippers in trouble? And do you think that if you were giving them advice, you would tell them to maybe take a lower offer than they thought versus waiting longer to try to get the price that they want?
So the luxury flipping market, which is, really what my expertise would be in, is way down because the inventory is way down. So what happened was, when I first got into the business 10 or 12 years ago, I could go pick up a house in Cheney Estates for $1 million. That same house right now is probably $3 million. So that completely ate away at our margins. So the individuals who own these 1990 to early 2000 homes in Paradise Valley, when they were dumping them before, now because inventory is tight, they're asking a big premium, and there isn't really enough margin for somebody to come in. So you're getting end users who are coming in and putting lipstick on it to be able to say, I live in Paradise Valley, I'm in 8,000 square feet, I'm in it for 5.7, when that house is, as a new build, might be 15 million. So right. Not as many people I see in the flipping business because of that increase in what the homeowners are asking for their properties.
So I know you've been in in the real estate business a long time, as a realtor, as a developer, as a flipper, and I think what might be interesting is to let people know how different each one of those categories are. Like the entry level, the mid level, the ultra luxury, like you're in, and how you've kind of moved around, because there's very different things that go on in each of those sectors, even though they're all classified as single family real estate.
Yeah. I've never really dabbled in the in kind of the lower end. There's some individuals who are out there and they're absolutely crushing it in that. They're doing 100 houses a year. They've got a system in place where they've got somebody that's coming in and replacing the carpet and painting the house and replacing the appliances, and they're doing this stuff in like 30, 45 days. And I'm blown away at what that takes. You would think, it's so sexy to see us flip a house and charge $15 million for it. We're extremely sophisticated, and we are, but I think the sophistication is those guys doing it in 30 days and doing a pretty decent job, and doing it on the scale that they're doing it, pretty incredible. I mean, to get one painter to show up sometimes is hard enough. If they've got 30 houses going, they've got to have an army of painters. So I don't really speak on that because it's just not really my expertise, but I can speak on kind of that mid-level, because we definitely were in that for a period of time, which, let's say it's around $1 million. And at that price point, you're probably not moving a lot of walls. You're probably not doing a lot of structural. What you're really looking for is, great lots with great floor plans that just kind of need mostly cosmetic, that you can do as quickly as possible and get a good return because it's a great location. Especially gated neighborhoods where they're not tearing down houses and they were built past 1990, so they got the nice tall ceilings. We've dabbled in that before. It's always been really profitable. And what I could say is there's always a buyer. There's always a buyer for that market and that price point. As you start to get into luxury and ultra luxury, you're definitely a specialist. Like, you definitely need to understand underwriting at a whole nother level. You're possibly moving the kitchen to a completely different part of the house. You're possibly redoing some of the architecture of the house, and it's just a lot more complicated. Obviously, the margins are much better, but the risks are going to be a lot higher. The amount of people that you're going to need to get involved and the time it's going to take you to do it is going to be a lot more. I would tell people, until you've been in the business for 5 to 7 years, I wouldn't even consider dabbling in kind of that luxury, ultra luxury market, because if you buy it for $4 million and you plan on putting 2 to 3 million in, you start to make a couple mistakes. It's an easy way to lose $1 million.
So you were already investing before you became an agent. So how did getting your real estate license change your business? Or did it?
Yeah, a lot of real estate agents are going to hate when I say this, but what I realized is they were just all bad. They were all bad. I mean, there's 5 or 7 people in this town who really know what they're doing. There's a lot of people who are really good marketers, but really aren't great real estate agents, and they can fool people. So I was like, I think I have to do this myself. And once I did it, that was the game changer, because it really started to become the differentiator between all the other developers. Once I got into the weeds as a real estate agent, I started seeing so many more deals and deals so much earlier than every other developer that I realized that was where I needed to focus my time. Building the house between the design and the architecture and the landscape, somebody else is doing that. I'm not drawing the house. And then when it comes to actually building out the house, it wasn't my background. So the smarter thing for me to do was to go out there and find people who had been doing it 20, 25 years at big businesses, pay them a few more bucks and bring them over to my company, let them build out the houses. The whole deal was finding the deal and then making sure that plan that was being presented to you by the landscape architect, the pool builder, the architect, the interior designers, that was what the market was looking for. And I was coming to them with cutting edge, real-time information as to what the market was looking for. And I think that was the big differentiator that made us so successful.
I know a lot, like along the way, a lot of people are strapped with cash, right? They have the reason to want to do it. Yeah. And I know, you were also in that category for a while. So what would you say to somebody who doesn't have the money, is looking at hard money? Because we were having dinner the other night and you were telling us a bunch of stories about, kind of the pros and cons of it, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody's going to move forward with some hard money, what are some golden rules? The
biggest misnomer in this business is that you could have a great deal and you can't have the money. That is absolutely unequivocally a fairy tale. There is 1,000 guys out there who are dying to give you the money if you have a great deal. Because at the end of the day, if you screw it up, they're going to take it back and they want the deal. Like ultimately they would love to have your deal that's got 2x on it. And they say, oh, well, I screwed it up. It's okay. I'm the lender. I'll take it back. And they'll make the 2x on it. So everything in this business is about finding the deal. If you can find the deal, there's a million different ways that you can make money. Number one, let's say you didn't have the money, you didn't have the resources, you don't have the experience to be able to do the flip. You stumble upon a deal that's $6 million and it's probably worth $8 million and you've got the deal and you don't know what to do with it. You don't have the money. You can assign that contract to somebody like me and make a ton of money. I'm happy to give you an assignment fee of hundreds of thousands of dollars if you can get me into a deal at 6.3 that's worth $8 million, right? So there's a way to make money there. If you want to actually do the deal yourself, the biggest obstacle is really going to be your experience. It's not going to be the money. Like you're going to go to a hard money lender and they're going to say, of course, I'd love to give you the money. You can always find somebody else who might even do the equity portion of it. You're going to pay them a ton, but they'll do it if you have the experience, if they believe that you're going to get to the finish line and actually execute on the deal. The bigger obstacle is having a lack of experience. And what I would say is, don't worry about the money. If you find a great deal, the money will always be there. Figure out how to become experienced operator. Figure out how to get next to somebody who's an experienced operator. Figure out how to work in their company. Figure out how to go be a site manager and learn every aspect of the business. That's when you become invaluable. That's when you sit down in front of a hard money lender and say, I've got a deal. I don't have any money, but here's my experience. And they'll be like, we'll figure it out. Like if it's got enough white meat on the end of this thing, somebody will figure out how to get you the money. And I'm one of those guys. Like if somebody came to me and they had the right deal, I'd be happy to get them the money.
When you started, obviously you didn't have all this experience, right? And you had somebody that, believed in you, right?
Yeah.
Right. So what did you do? Because I think a lot of people are in that category.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, the guy looked at you and he's like, I know Frank's gonna. He's really betting on you, right? So what can you do if you don't have that experience?
Yeah. The first thing I would tell you is the cheat code in this business would be to flip your own house. If you can get into your own primary residence and and you don't have the money, the mortgage you're going to probably get is probably extremely low, and you don't have that weight of you of carry. You know what I mean? It's like every month you're paying that carry and it's killing you. You're living in the house, So the first 5 houses we flipped were all our personal residence.
Okay.
So that's definitely the cheat code for kind of getting into this business. And you're going to start at whatever you can afford. If you can buy a house for $200,000, then that's going to be your first flip. If you can buy a house for $400,000, then that's your first flip. And it gives you the opportunity that if you mess something up, it's just an inconvenience for you. It's not really hurting your bottom line too bad because you don't have that additional carry because you're living in the house.
Well, because the carry is the expense, right? It's the hard money that's the expense.
I mean, 10, 11, 12% on a loan, and then you got a construction loan on top of that. I mean, yeah, it's going to eat you alive if you make mistakes. And I think that's one of the things that if you're not really in the business, you don't really realize that's the problem. They think like, oh, I got to buy an expensive light. I got to buy an expensive refrigerator. It's like, no. That should all be in your under. It's this that's going to get you. It's the carry.
Right.
So I've walked into houses where I'm like, why did you do that here? Why did they spend the money here?
Yep.
There's a science to that, right?
Yeah.
Like, so how do you decide where the money is directed? Because I sometimes see people that spend way too much money in the wrong areas
Yep.
and not enough in others.
Yep. Inexperienced developers is really what it is. I mean, the most common thing that I see is that you're getting young men, especially who are not married, who are like, I want to hustle. I want to get into this business. And then they go flip a house like a bachelor. And they think like, oh, I'm going to make this thing so cool. I'm going to have crystals and I'm going to have, all this crazy paint and all that kind of stuff. And then 90% of the buyers are couples walk in and the wife's looking at them going like, no, what is this?
Yeah, this is a man.
And he's like, oh, this is so cool,
Yeah.
That's definitely the biggest mistakes I've seen. And sometimes that goes all the way up into luxury. I've seen where, you get people into luxury and they're thinking, you know what, I'm going to make this thing like a bachelor pad. And that's just not the marketplace. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen for sure.
Yeah. People try to be really trendy sometimes too. And I think, there's a risk to that because you might have someone walk in and be like, oh my God, I love that these cabinets are bright green.
Yeah,
And, it's the trend right now. But there's a risk to it because if they don't like it, they're not thinking, oh, I can easily just change the cabinet.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't like the house. They're
for sure.
very shallowly thinking about what they're walking into.
I mean, I'm astonished when I hear why people don't buy houses. I hear people say like, I don't like the color of the floor. I don't like that. And I'm like, we could fix that.
Yeah.
Very simply, you're not looking at price, location, layout, view, all these other things. You're worried about all these small designer picks. But yeah, you're exactly right. It is an art to figuring out how to do that. I think if somebody asked what our strategy was, I would say we're always timeless. Like everything that we do is timeless. And then occasionally we look at what I would consider like pops. As my mentor told me, the sizzle sells the steak. And he would say, always find that little pop of something that you can do, that little hidden door into a pantry or, that little secret, panic room that's got a screen in it, something that somebody goes, wow, that's kind of cool, but doing, I think too much of that is the opposite effect, but having a little bit of a pop of that, I think separates you from your competition.
Really, really good idea. Yeah. So I know you just went through a big acquisition with a new agency, right? Yeah. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I was a managing partner at Compass, and when the opportunity came to me to be able to acquire the agency, I wanted to do it. I think it was such an incredible brand. It didn't have the same heyday it has in LA and New York and different places across the country, and I wanted to see that for it. But, at the end of the day, now I've got 50 new agents who are also looking for deals for me, and I'm looking at ways that I could help their business. I'm looking at ways that I could help them when they've got a Binzer and they don't know what to do. I mean, we're in construction. Like, we can help with so many different facets of that, the negotiation process, or they've got a client who is having trouble getting financing. It's like, look, I've borrowed hundreds of millions of dollars. I've got 50 different people we can finance through. Here's some other names and numbers to call. And I think that experience has been able to allow me to go out there and get some great agents who are coming to the agency and some big ones that we're going to be announcing soon that are going to be real game changers.
So you said when you first started in real estate, because I had the same awakening as how bad a lot of real estate agents are, and people don't really see it because they don't see the behind the scenes. Like all people see is people opening doors for you and showing you houses, but you don't see the back end negotiations. If there is one, you don't see the communication or lack thereof. So when somebody's looking for an agent, what do you think characteristics they should look for or not look for?
The first question you should ask is, well, how invested are you in real estate? And if the person says, I have one house, it's mine, I've lived in it for 25 years and it's in Chandler, I'm going to show you paradise. My question would always be, if you were absolutely the best, you were the person, man or woman, that knew Paradise Valley real estate better than anyone, why wouldn't you be investing? It's 10 times the multiples of being a real estate agent. It's way sexier. You control your own fate. Why wouldn't you be doing that? Because at the end of the day, they don't really know. And they're going, you know what? I'm willing to risk your money. If it doesn't work out, it's fine. I'm just going to live in my house. But they're not willing to risk their own money. Nobody's invested in Paradise Valley, Scottsdale as a real estate agent more than I have. And I think that is the defining answer to that question. But if you're really going to understand a real estate agent, at the end of the day, they're running their own business. You know, they're really an operator of a business. They have to understand negotiation. They have to understand the carry of a home if they're going to be, if it's an investment, if it's your own personal property, you know, how the mortgage is going to be if you're going to have a mortgage, negotiations, locations, sun exposure, road noise, 50 other different things that they're not thinking about that I'm thinking about as an investor, besides the fact that they need to do, you know, marketing and all these different things. I will tell you the biggest misnomer in our business, which is that great marketing sells houses. It's absolutely unequivocally the dumbest thing that I've ever heard. When real estate agents put ads in magazines, television, anything that you can think of, they're doing that to go to their client and say, look what I'm doing for you.
Right.
Don't cancel the listing on me. I'm doing so much for you. They're not trying to sell their house. And I get people on the phone who ask me that question. I give them that answer and they're appalled. They're appalled. And they go, that's absolutely, I can't believe you just said that to me. And I say, okay, fine. I said, do you mind if I put it to the test? And they said, sure, let's put it to the test. I said, okay, we're living here in Scottsdale, Arizona. You decide that it's time and you're going to move to Tampa, Florida. We're moving to Tampa. And I said, okay, you're the client. I'm your agent. What are we going to do? We're going to go buy a magazine? Right. You're going to go on the radio and look for houses in Tampa? Or you're going to go on television and maybe see if their house in Tampa?
Somebody's social media profile and
social media
reels.
And just hope that one house that's in Tampa is your house. I said, no, the strategy is going to be, we're going to call who we believe is the number one real estate agent in Tampa for what you do. Is it a condo? Is it a single family house? Do you want to live on the water? We're going to find that person. And then we're going to tell them, this is exactly what we're looking for. We want a single level house that's on the water. That's this. And we want you to use every resource that you have between on market and off market to look. And then what are you going to do as the buyers? You're going to sit in bed and be like, honey, look, Zillow, Tampa, Florida. Love this one.
So true.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's what people do. So instead of thinking about yourself as a buyer and you were going to go somewhere else, they just look at what all these real estate agents, all the hocus pocus that they're trying to show them with, look at this ad and look at this things that I'm doing for them. It's all BS.
The listing reels, you know, those are really just to attract more sellers. Like, oh, wow, look at what this real estate agent is doing for this house. I want them to make a reel for my house. But the reel doesn't actually sell the house.
No.
It's just like it's marketing for the agent.
You know, people, they get a lot of views and people like to look at them because they want to look at your house. You know, is there the occasion that somebody happens to stumble upon somebody and they tell the story for the rest of their career that somebody saw a reel and they ended up buying the house? Sure, that's fine. That's like playing the lottery. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, what they should be doing is they should be concentrating on what is the actual way that somebody buys a house and how can I focus my efforts on being laser focused on exposing it in that way. And it's really realtor.com. It's really Zillow. What they really should be doing is they should be more concerned with their pictures. Like as a real estate agent, you should spend as much money as humanly possible on the pictures, on making sure the angles are right, making sure that you're showing off, you know, the correct aspects of the house, but not too much. That's another thing. I've seen listings sometimes where there's 112 pictures. I have sellers that call me and say, I want you to put up 100 pictures. And I say, okay, people are going to look through the pictures and be like, I already seen the entire house. Like I've seen everything in the house. I don't need to go see it. I want to put up 25 pictures, the 25 best. And then I want somebody to call me and go, what are the guest closets like? You know how many pictures then up? And I was like, come see it.
Plus, you know, with people, you know, good pictures are extremely important, but you know, they see the one picture they don't like and they no longer want to see the house anymore. So when you overexpose it, you have an issue where it's like, I don't like that guest closet. cross it off the list. And, like you said, get them there, get them to love the area, love the house, and then they can see the rest of the house. So I agree with you, though. I think this is a big misnomer in our industry of marketing sells houses. And I think in a lot of like listing appointments, the realtor talks about everything they're going to do to market the home. And I think to your point, you just need to focus where people are already looking, because where people are already looking is not going to change.
Yeah. And, when somebody says, okay, let's say they buy into that. They say, okay, fine, I buy into what you're saying about the marketing things. Why should I go with you? I say, in my opinion, and the people I talk to, they would say I am the best salesperson that you can hire in this market.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get me in the house and you get me with that buyer, my ability to sell, regardless of what it is, an airplane, a helicopter, or a house, that's where I'm going to separate from everyone else. And the only way for me to be able to, use that superpower is to get them in the house and to walk them around the house.
So with realtor communication, because I think that this is a big one from behind the scenes, is like, how would you tell someone to evaluate how their realtor is going to be communicating with a potential buyer or a potential seller? Because I don't know about you, but I work with a lot of realtors, and there's no I have a buyer that wants to buy the property, but I can't get through to the realtor to even open up a conversation with the seller to even start to try to negotiate.
Yeah. Obviously if you're the listing agent and there's a buyer out there and they're represented, you don't want to reach out to them. It's unethical, but you want to reach out to their agent. You want to start a conversation with them. Luckily, I'm dealing in almost exclusively luxury, and in the luxury market, everybody is so greedy that you call them on the phone and they call you right back. Right. They've got an assistant or they've got somebody and you're getting in touch with somebody. But have I heard that in the industry? Of course.
Mm-hmm.
The barrier to entry to becoming a real estate agent is extremely low. And you're getting people who are family members, friends of friends, who are getting listings, and they might even have another job. They might have a full-time job and they're doing this on the side and they can't pick up the phone. And it's a complete nightmare. What I would say is, if you are not exceptionally wealthy, you should be picking the absolute best real estate agent possible. Forget about your friends and let them sell your house.
Well, Ken and I, we love, we bought a couple of deals together, and we always love it when we get an uncle, a wife, a friend, because we always get the best deals that way.
Yeah, for a lot of people, this is probably their biggest asset, in their entire net worth, and I think they need to treat it as such. I think they need to treat it, like I said, like their health or anything else. Treat it as if it is your biggest asset.
So let's move into the luxury real estate, because I know everyone is so curious about luxury real estate, and you work in the Paradise Valley market where you can have a 10, 15, $20 million house.
Even 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, moving up. So what's the most outrageous thing that you've seen a luxury buyer ask for when you're either showing or you're talking about building?
Yeah, I mean, probably the most common one, I haven't seen anything that's really out there, but the most common one would be the car in the garage. So, you've got a house that's $15 million, the buyer wants to offer $13 million or something like that. And the seller's like, oh, this is ridiculous. I need at least a real offer. And they say, well, you know what? All right, maybe I can go up to 14 million, but I want the car. And it's some $200,000 to $500,000 incredible car that's in the garage. And then I'm like, now I'm selling cars, and houses and everything else. This is insane. But I think that would probably be the most common one that's asked for.
So that's common.
It's happened multiple times, and I know of deals that have happened where it's actually transpired, where the car stayed with the house.
So just take the cars out of the garage.
Take the cars out of the garage, unless you think you're making a tremendous margin, and you can leave it in there as bait and say, you know what, I'll just throw the Ferrari in, you can just have it.
Oh, that's funny. Well, so what's the biggest misconception people have about these wealthy buyers?
I think the biggest misconception on the wealthy side is that, the average individual sees wealth as like fame, and they think flash. It's absolutely the opposite. Like when somebody comes up in a super fancy car and they get out and they got the glasses and the shoes and everything else, I look at my assistant and I'm like, there's no deal here. Like, these people are going to do Instagram. As soon as somebody comes up and, their car's
T-shirts and Converse.
Their car's like 5 years old. It's nice. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's 5 years old. I'm like, here's our buyer.
Yeah.
Here's where they come in, because, the way that people make a lot of money is usually not very sexy. There's not a lot of, pop stars and professional athletes out there as there is, people who have figured out ways to recycle cardboard and are making $20 million a year doing that, or, in the shipping business or something like that. And when I look at my buyers who have spent 10, 20, $30 million on houses, and I look at who they are, they're low key, never would have known it. Very rarely, the big flashy I think those are a small minority of the luxury deals.
So if someone handed you $100,000 today and wanted to build wealth through real estate, would you buy rentals, flip houses, or do something completely different?
You know, long term, I would say if I was depend on what age I was. If it was going to be a really long term play, I love that play where you buy a rental, you put a few bucks into it, you put a renter in there, and then you leverage that into getting another one, and you build this giant portfolio over time by leveraging the equity that you're making in some of these houses to have like a 200 or 300. I mean, within 15 years, you could have a couple $100 million. I mean, and you could start that with $100,000. You could start it with $50,000, to be honest. If you were at a different point in your career and you were like, hey, I need to start to make money right now, then I would say flip houses for sure. I would say that's where the immediate returns are. And you can take some of that money and leverage it. If I had $100,000, I probably wouldn't put it into one deal. If I was just starting, I'd probably try to leverage it into 3 or 4 deals that were smaller, mitigate my risk a little bit, and have multiple deals going rather than kind of put all my eggs in one basket.
So you've seen multiple market cycles. So what's the biggest opportunity you think investors are missing right now?
A mentor of mine once said that you can make money in any market, and it's true. When everything is in the toilet and everybody's running for the hills, buy. When everything's on fire, you should be selling. If it's mediocre, which I think is the majority of the time, I think, yeah, if you look at the trends, you're going to see these times where it's flying high COVID like crazy, in 2008 where it's absolutely, dystopia out there. It's Harry Carey, but the majority of the time it's kind of in the middle. So what separates people who are making money from not making money when it's in the middle? Finding the deal, hustling. I mean, make 100 phone calls and find that great deal. That deal is out there. That deal's out there at all times. One of those deals is out there somewhere. You just got to go find it. When it's flying high, it's hard to buy. You're probably moving your inventory. When it's low, it's easy to buy. Then you can put out 10 offers and people are begging you to buy their house. But I think the real great players show themselves in the everyday market and still get good deals.
What would you say? How much does interest rates have to do with the velocity right now?
Yeah, I mean, for the business that I'm in, it's zero. Ultra luxury, there's no impact by the interest rates at all. Everything I see is cash. In the last 100 deals I've done, I might have seen 3 or 4 loans. Everybody's coming in with cash, and most of the ultra luxury buyers don't really care. It might affect their business, like whatever business they're in might be suffering a little bit, and they may buy a house that's less expensive than they would have if their business was booming. I also think that Arizona is an insulated market. I think if you're in Omaha or if you're in, Tampa, Florida, I think interest rates could affect you quite a bit. What's going on in Portland, Seattle, California, weather in Canada, weather in the Midwest, the amount of people that are moving here, when you're in one of those markets and you're thinking to yourself, whether for tax reasons or weather reasons or asthma or anything else, why are you going to move to Arizona? Or you're going to move, where are you going to go? Nevada, great place. I just don't see a lot of people wanting to move there full time. Nashville, Tennessee is nice. It's a certain culture that I think is there. It's really country. And some people who are not really into that don't see Nashville as a great option for them. And then a lot of the other markets that are hot right now are really vacation markets, Aspen or Whitefish, Montana, or Coeur d'Alene, or, places like that. So where's the one place that's, on the western part of the United States that you can have a great lifestyle for at least 6 months and a day? Scottsdale Paradise Valley is one of the only real good choices if you're looking for a great international airport, if you're looking for great weather 7 months out of the year, low taxes, great people. And, now we've got great restaurants and we've got great shopping, and everything that's pretty much at other places is starting to come here because of our tremendous growth.
So we've obviously been watching things online with the fires in the Palisades, the politics that are going on in some of these cities, Portland, Seattle, LA, and now this wealth tax, right? Wealth tax is a big deal. I don't think people realize how big of a deal. So you have obviously got to be kind of a funnel to see this firsthand. Like, what are these people saying to you? Because I was looking in the Paradise Valley paper actually last week, and it was showing how many people were coming from all the different states.
Yeah. First comment I want to make is I love wealth taxes everywhere outside of Arizona. Please keep them up, increase them.
No kidding.
It is tremendous for my business. No, it's having a huge impact. I mean, people are just getting fed up. There's always some sort of trigger that gets somebody to just go, okay, that's enough. The one that sticks out in my mind the most was I get a call from a Seattle number to a 201 number, which as soon as I see one of those, I automatically pick it up. I see a California or Seattle or Portland, I pick it up immediately because I know it's probably a buyer coming here. And they said, hey, we did some research. You're the guy. We want to buy a house. We're looking for around 8 to 10 million. Can you show us around tomorrow? And I said, sure. And I want to qualify the person a little bit. I want to get an understanding. So I said, why are you moving? What are you looking for? They said, well, we went to dinner last night, and wife got out of the car, and we were going to the restaurant, and a homeless guy grabbed her by the leg, and she didn't want to go to dinner. She just ran back into the car, and he was like, that's it. Like that was the moment when he's like, okay. So then I was like, okay, talk to me about like your flight and everything else. He's like, flight, what are you talking about? I was like, like what time are you going to get in? You need picked up from there. He's like, I'm in the car right now driving to Arizona. He's like, my next phone call is going to be a resort to figure out where we're going to stay. He's like, we're on our way. He's like, they were at that point that he's like, my assistant's going to pack us up. Like, we're not going back. And when I started to hear stuff like that, and I was just like, when people get to that point that they're just done and they've got the money to do whatever they want, something that I talk a lot about, which because of how much money there is with the baby boomers, is I get people who, when I'm talking to them in their mind, I can almost see what they're doing. And what they're doing is they're looking at a calendar and they're looking at their bank account, and they're starting to realize that their entire life, this was the worry. And then all of a sudden a day comes that all of a sudden it's 100% this. They're going, I got 12 good years left on earth and I have more money for 3 lifetimes. Like, I'm not worried about this anymore. I'm worried exclusively about this. And then everything starts to become about time. Mm-hmm. And I have adjusted my business based on seeing that change in so many different individuals. The amount of wealth that the ultra wealthy are getting, I mean, it's increasing so quickly because of what's going on with real estate, inflation, the stock market, and just them having a ton of assets, and all of a sudden inflation making them worth a lot more money. That they're going, look, I'm not worried about money anymore. I'm worried about time. How do I get places faster? How do I stand in line less? How do I not have to worry about things? How do I go to less meetings? How do I enjoy my life better? And I've pretty much adjusted my whole business to figure out how to service that clientele.
So from a market standpoint, how do they land on Scottsdale, Paradise Valley? Because obviously there's a lot of choices. If you're in Seattle and you're looking, countrywide or wherever, obviously I know what it's like because we live here, but what are they seeing and what's top of mind?
Yeah, I think it's, I think weather, taxes, I'd probably taxes, weather, because we do have tremendous weather 7 months out of the year. I think they're looking at things like proximity to private and international airports. And I think they're also looking at just quality of life. Like, is there a lot of traffic? No. Is there great restaurants? Yes. Is there great shopping? Is there anything that I want that I can't get? And they vacation when they look for other things. Yes. Do we have tremendous culture here like New York City? No, but it's like, go visit New York. Like, you can go see that in a week. But where they want to hang their hat every day. And I think one of the best things about our market for people who don't live here, they don't really understand, is we just have great people. Like, we get a lot of people who are the reason that they're moving is because they're in a place and they're going like, this isn't my life. Like, I'm a good person. Like, I don't want to deal with any of this anymore. Where do I go? Their refugee is Arizona, and they're around other people who are like, me too. Like, that was crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm normal. I'm going to be here with you. They're playing golf. They're going to dinner. They're conversing with other like-minded, great people. It's such a great melting pot. We're getting people from all over the place, different countries even. And, I don't think there's a better place to live.
It's funny because I have a lot of California investors that come to buy rental property in Arizona. And after a couple rental properties, I'm like, can we go look at this house, for $1 million? And I'm like, well, it's kind of expensive for a rental. Like, no, I just want to look at it because I actually might move here.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's happened more than once. So it's true though, because it's so nice here. People don't realize till they visit.
I think if you're a buyer and you buy the house and you don't buy the location, equally as important or more important, I think ultimately you're going to probably end up making a mistake. There's just certain times that somebody buys a bad lot and puts a nice house on it. Or, long time ago, somebody put a nice house on it, somebody remodeled it, and they go in there and they're like, man, this is everything that we want. And I'm like, yeah, but it's a west facing, we've got road noise. Like, are we sure we want to do this? And they just fall in love with the house and they decide, you know what, I'm going to buy it anyway. And 9 times out of 10, they get stuck with it. Like eventually whatever's that coolness 7 years from now isn't cool anymore. Now all of a sudden it's not cool, west facing, street noise, all this bad stuff. And then they're stuck with it.
So I always tell people, I've never had someone come back to me and say, oh, I bought in this location that I loved, but I hate this house. It's always, thank you so much. I bought in this location and now I can never afford to live here. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I do get people that they buy the house, not in the location that's ideal for them, but they love the house anyways. And then in 2 years, they're trying to list the house to sell it to move.
Yeah.
Because I think that location is something that if you're not buying in the ideal location, you're going to regret it, regardless of the house.
Yeah. I mean, look, you can always change the house. Like, between paint, furniture, tweaking a couple things, you can always make that. I mean, there's almost no house out there that if a company like us went in there that we couldn't make it really outstanding. It's pretty rare that I walk into something and go, this thing is absolutely hopeless. Which is why I think great investors understand that the location, the lot, the orientation is everything. The quietness of it, even the maturity of the landscape. It's something that's really difficult to duplicate is getting those 50-year-old trees on your lot. I mean, just buying those and sticking them in isn't really realistic.
So I want to chat a little bit about the restaurant. So the only reason I want to bring it up is because you started software, then you led it in real estate and all kinds of stuff in real estate. And then all of a sudden you're in the restaurant business. But I think it's really interesting. Some people have a dream of starting a restaurant and being in a restaurant. What you saw was a very different opportunity. I was really struck by that.
Yeah. I mean, it was no different than a flip. And it's funny, having started this restaurant and becoming extremely successful, the joke now is every time I go somewhere, they're like, you're that restaurant guy. I'm like, I've sold $600 million in real estate, built 50 houses, building the most expensive spec in the history of Arizona. And I have a restaurant, by the way, and they know nothing about that. They just know the restaurant. But yeah, it wasn't this. I mean, was there an aspect of that I had a dream to open a restaurant? Yes. Well, when you're scrolling on your phone looking for Italian food, your phone is going to start throwing you stuff everywhere, and it threw me a video of a restaurant in Scottsdale that I had never heard of, that I don't think anybody had heard of, that I looked at the video and the pictures and I was like, this food is better. So we went and it was exactly what it was the story the pictures told. It was the best Italian food I had ever eaten. Just missed the mark, So it was like a flip, it was like going into the best neighborhood and finding the absolute best house. It's hard to take credit because you weren't the architect, you weren't the builder, you weren't all these different things. But when people come in at the end and they see it and they're like, man, this is incredible. It's like, yeah, well, we kind of flipped it. That's really what happened with the restaurant was we didn't touch the food.
Well, I know, so it's called DiMaggio's, by the way, but we went to your opener.
So if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice when you were first starting out, what would it be?
I had a mentor who taught me a lot about the business. And one of the things that he always said to me was, step on the gas and step on the brake, step on the gas and step on the brake. And what he was trying to explain to me was, don't go all in at any one point. If you get a little turn in the market, it's going to wipe you out. Don't push on the brake too hard where you're only doing one deal at a time if you want to grow. I caught an incredible cycle. I came right out of, my 2010, let's call it, or 11 or 12 was the beginning of like what was going to be a 15-year boom. If I could go back in time, I would have bought a lot more houses. I would have done a lot more deals. There was a lot of deals that I passed on over a small amount of money that I would have made a lot of money on. The one thing that has been absolutely consistent that I learned later in my life was if you can get into quality, if you can get into what is universally seen as the best, the chances of making money in that are much higher than everything else.
Yeah, Ken basically says the same thing. He always tells me to buy the worst house in the best neighborhood. And, you can't really go wrong because when everything appreciates, it's going to appreciate with it. So
absolutely.
Well, thanks for having, thanks for being on.
Thanks,
and
man.
How can everyone get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. Frank at the agency is my handle. That's probably the one that I would say is the most. And then, of course, the restaurant is DiMaggio's AZ. Follow either one of those for any new information about what I'm doing in real estate or in the restaurant.